Now we come to the second part of the visit of the spirit of Christmas yet to come. The second part of stave 4. The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They came to poor Bob Cratchit's house and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up to Peter, their elder brother, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing. But surely they were very quiet. Peter read, "And Jesus took a child and set him in the midst of them." Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamt them. The boy must have read them out, and as he and the spirit crossed the threshold, why did he not go on? The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face. "The colour hurts my eyes," she said. The colour? Ah, poor Tiny Tim. "There, that's better now," said Cratchit's wife. "It makes them weep by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time." "Past it, rather," Peter answered, shutting his book. "But I think he has walked a little slower than he used these past few evenings, Mother." They were quiet again. At last she said, and in a steady, cheerful voice that faltered only once, "I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed." "And so have I," cried Peter. "Often." "And so have I," exclaimed another, and so had all. "But he was very light to carry," she resumed, intent upon her work, "and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. And there is your father at the door." She hurried out to meet him, and little Bob, in his comforter, he had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it most. Then the two young Cratchits got up upon his knees and laid each child a little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind it, father. Don't be grieved." Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would be done long before Sunday, he said. "Sunday? You went today then, Robert?" said his wife. Yes, my dear," replied Bob. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him before he died that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child," cried Bob. "My little child." He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been further apart, perhaps, than they were. He left the room and went upstairs, into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the body of the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down upon it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself, he stood, bent down, and kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened, and went down again, quite happy. They drew about the fire and talked, the girls and mother working still. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had scarcely seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street that day, and seeing that he looked just a little down, said Bob inquired what had happened to distress him. On which, said Bob, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you have ever heard, I told him about Tiny Tim. I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how did he ever know that? How did he know that? Know what, my dear? What, that you were a good wife, replied Bob. Well, everyone knows that, said Peter. Very well observed, my boy, cried Bob. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he said, for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that's where I live. Pray come to me. Now, it wasn't, cried Bob, for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as his kind way, that it made it delightful. It really seemed as if he'd known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. I'm sure he's a good soul, said Mrs. Cratchit. You can be sure of that, my dear, returned Bob. If you saw and spoke to him, I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation. Oh, only hear that, Peter, said Mrs. Cratchit. And then one of the other girls cried, then Peter will be keeping company with someone else and setting up for himself. Oh, get along with you, retorted Peter, grinning. It's just as likely as not, said Bob, one of these days, though there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But however and whenever we part from one another, I'm sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was amongst us? Never, father, never, cried them all. And I know, said Bob, I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily amongst ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it. Never, father, never, they all cried again. I'm very happy, said little Bob. I'm very happy. Mrs. Cratchit kissed him. His daughters kissed him. The two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and himself shook hands. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God. Spectre, said Scrooge. Something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me, what man was that whom we saw lying dead? The spirit of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before, though at a different time, he thought. Indeed, there seemed no order in these latter visions, save that they were in the future into the resorts of business men, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. This court, said Scrooge, through which we hurry now, is my place of occupation, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder, Scrooge exclaimed. Why do you point away? The inexorable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, and wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied it until he reached an iron gate. He paused to look round before entering. A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose name he was now to learn lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overgrown by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite. A worthy place. The spirit stood amongst the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape. Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, said Scrooge, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only? Still the phantom pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. Men's course will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if persevered in, they must lead, said Scrooge. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me. The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I the man who lay upon that bed? He cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, spirit, no. The finger was still there. Spirit, he cried, tight clutching at its robe. Hear me, I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? For the first time the hand appeared to shake. Good spirit, he pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it, your nature intercedes for me, it pities me. Assure me that I may yet change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honour Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, that the spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons they teach. Oh, tell me that I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost.